Hello again, and welcome to The Whole Life. I'm Grace Fielding.
And I'm Paul Woolley. And today we're wrapping up our first season of the podcast by reflecting on the conversations that we've had over the last 6 months. Hello, it's good to be back.
And for the last time in this series, Paul.
Yes, that's right. Are you emotional, Grace?
Yeah, I guess I do feel a bit sad. It's been a great experience. So, yeah, it feels crazy to be wrapping it up now.
It does indeed, doesn't it? But all good things must come to an end, although, of course, this doesn't come to an end. This is the gift that keeps on going. This is just the first series, just the start of a whole exciting adventure. And as you know, the Whole Life podcast seeks to connect the Christian story with all of life. And we hope that we've been able to do at least some of that during the last 13 episodes of the first series.
Yes, it's been a lot of fun. And thank you to you, our listeners, for coming along for the ride with us. And we've been delighted, maybe even a little surprised, that our highest audience figure reached 40,000 for a single episode, which, yeah, we were blown away by.
Yeah, that is very exciting. That was extraordinary, wasn't it? And during the last 6 months, we've covered a whole range of subjects, haven't we, Grace? We've covered politics, the imagination, being yourself, prayer, beauty and justice, comedy and the BBC, AI, slavery, the rebirth of belief in God, leadership, illustration and design, fashion and developments in science. And we're really grateful to all our brilliant guests who have been on the show.
We really are. There's been such a brilliant range of people that we've heard from. But let's get into a bit of a reflective moment, shall we, Paul? What stood out to you throughout the season that we've just been through? Were there any surprises that you weren't expecting, or maybe took you a bit off guard?
Well, definitely. I was really surprised by how small the royalties fee was that an illustrator gets who produces a card. I
Yeah,
mean,
I thought you meant
5%,
our
was that the
royalties for
figure?
a second. Then
Yeah, yeah. I mean, our royalties are even less than the
but
designer
you
of the
mean the
card,
cards?
but
Yeah,
the cards, but that's just extraordinary, wasn't it? Was it 5% was the figure that Martha Ratcliffe talked
it was
about,
very
something
low.
in that
Yes,
region?
yeah.
Very low. So that surprised me. But on a more serious point, Grace, although that is obviously serious, especially if you're a designer, on a more serious point in terms of your question, I would say one of the things that surprised me actually has been how hopeful the various episodes that we have been. I think it's,
Mm.
sometimes easy to think that there's, given what we're about in terms of connecting the Christian story with all of life and the particular subjects we looked at, there would be, easily, reasonably a possibility that you sort of come away from some of these subjects feeling quite sort of heavy and, concerned. And it's not to say that wasn't there, but it's to say that, overall there was a sense of hope and optimism that I found refreshing and probably did find a little bit surprising. I think the other thing is how, we have just covered such a range of subjects, haven't we? Sort of left and right hand brain sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
So the kind of the verbal, the analytical, the orderly, but also the sort of intuitive and creative and visual. And it's interesting, isn't it, how even though there have been such a variety of subjects, actually there have been a number of common themes that have cropped up throughout. So yeah, they were some of the things for me. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. I think I was trying to think back to how I sort of felt the very first episode that we did, and I suppose when I looked at the list of guests that I knew we were going to have on and the topics that we were going to cover, I suppose there probably was a part of me that felt a little bit skeptical about how easy it really would be to be able to see this link between the Christian story and some of the different topics, which if I'm honest, I'd never thought about all of them with through that lens before. So I suppose I've been surprised, but it's been a highlight actually to come to the end of each episode and to feel like each of our guests have really helped us unpack those topics in a way that does mean that I feel like we come to the end and I think, yeah, I really can see why that is a topic that God cares about, and that we see this link between the Christian story and insert topic. And it's just been, as you said, it's been a privilege to speak to experts. I mean, yeah, I definitely wouldn't probably have counted myself an expert in any of the topics that we've covered. So to just have that time to hear somebody who's done, whether it's research or written books, or is really kind of, leading the thinking over various different topics, has just been really enlightening and challenging. I think my surprise of the series was, I know we've all had a few laughs about sort of me not being the most naturally political person, but actually I think probably my surprising moment was in the politics episode that we recorded with Luke Bretherton. And I feel like he just completely reframed how we think about politics. And yeah, if you've not listened to that episode, I won't ruin it all, but essentially, have a listen to it. But I think Luke was really helpful in helping us to think about how politics can look in our everyday life, not necessarily just, when we have to vote or when we have to decide where we want, which party we want to support. And I think that for me was a really helpful way of sort of breaking it down. And I kind of that episode has really stuck with me, and helped me to kind of not feel quite so intimidated, I think, by the world of politics.
Yeah, and I don't think it's giving too much away, is it, Grace, to say that politics is probably something that we're going to think about a bit more in
I
the
think
not
that
too
would be
distant
true.
future. I mean, I just guess for a moment about that. Tell me, what about the episodes where you felt most outside your comfort zone? Was that the politics one, or was there
Um,
something else?
yeah, so I think probably I did feel outside my comfort zone with politics one, but I think that, as I said, I think as the episode kind of unfolded, I started to sort of maybe feel more comfortable because of the way we were talking about politics. I think the other one that stood out was the AI episode with Eve Poole, which was absolutely brilliant, but was I don't think I've even got a word for kind of the exercise that my mind did during that episode. And I think it highlighted, I think I knew that I didn't know a huge amount about AI. And I think I had this growing feeling of, this is something that I really probably should engage with a bit more, because it's a reality of what we're facing in our everyday now, that AI is a part of life. But I think I can remember sometimes, Eve would give these amazing answers, which I was genuinely captivated by, but I think I needed almost like a lie down after each one
Yeah, me
to
too.
have a think about them. So I definitely felt, out of my comfort zone. But again, I think that's the beauty of this podcast. That's part of why I've enjoyed it so much, because it's encouraged me to think through things that, if I'm honest, I maybe hadn't before.
Yeah,
So Paul, we obviously want to be, real and open with our listeners as much as we can.
transparent.
And so I wondered, obviously we've had lots of fun doing this podcast, but I wondered if there was a kind of behind the scenes moment that was particularly memorable, whether for good or bad reasons. That's up to you, or something that was just funny and that we had a good laugh about that we can share with people.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so
There's
much,
many.
Grace. I mean, where do we begin? But I suppose two reflections. One is I really enjoyed the podcast live events that we've done, and thank you so much to all of you who came along for those. Tom Holland and Justin Brierley, and also then the evening that we did with Pete Gregg. They were great fun and so good to meet so many people. So thank you for coming along. And then I suppose the behind the scenes thing is, as you know, Grace, and as Josh,
I can't
are
imagine what you're going to
ever,
say.
well, ever patient producer knows. I've had some technical issues, shall we say, throughout the whole series, in fact, and I don't think people would quite appreciate, even if I may be so bold, the lengths to which sometimes we have gone, and I have physically travelled to record these episodes.
Yeah.
So I hope that's been, I hope it's been worth it.
Yeah. I remember one
Appreciate.
particularly, I think maybe earlier on when we were recording, and we wanted to try and kind of, well, not that we haven't wanted to do things well for the rest of the episode, but for the rest of the series. But I remember there was one time where, because of your technical difficulties, let's just say, we had to pause recording on a given day. And then we
Yeah.
had to, I think it was the next day, or it may even have been a couple of days later, resume. And I remember sort of thinking, right, I need to wear exactly the same clothes, have my hair in exactly the same way. And then
Well
you
done,
went off and
Grace.
had a haircut in between.
Well, Grace, you see, you are a true professional, as we know, and a model, in fact, to us all.
Thank
And
you.
no, I mean, you wouldn't have had a haircut during that time. Although, in fairness, I think it actually was a few
I
days.
think it
That is my
was.
recollection.
I like,
Or
yeah.
maybe it just felt like a few days.
Yeah, and I think it was also after a topic that had been, you know, um, challenging, which meant that I was sort of thinking, "Oh my goodness, I feel like I need to listen back to the conversation to be able to
Yeah.
remember how we even reflect on it." Um, okay, so and then which episode? I think, yeah, obviously with all of these episodes, we probably come into them, don't we, with a sense of maybe assuming how the conversation will go, or maybe having some preconceived ideas of the kind of key topics or key headlines that our guests might share. But was there an episode that you felt like it kind of took a turn, or took a direction that was different to what you'd maybe expected initially?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably quite a few of them did. I think we all come in with a sort of sense of this is probably going to go in this direction, and quite a lot of them ended up going in slightly different places. I think the one on AI, which we've referenced a few times with Eve Poole, I mean, to be honest, probably with that one, I had no idea really where it was going to go. And it sort of surprised me. And again, we've already referenced the hopefulness thing. I thought, oh,
Mm,
that kind of took me back a bit, because I think I'd come to that with a sense that this is really problematic. I still think there are such huge issues around it, but I think it was really helpful to get that sort of other perspective, and perhaps more balanced
yeah,
perspective. I think the one with that we did with Christina Abbott on fashion,
yeah.
that, I mean, that surprised me in all sorts of ways. And looking back, I think the one question I wish we had asked, which just kind of didn't occur to me at the time, was, in that podcast, she talks about, the experience of dressing Tom Cruise being an interesting one. And she said there are all sorts of stories there.
You
And,
wish you'd asked what they were.
I should have asked what they were,
Yeah.
but I'm still interested to know. I think, I mean, I think it's been a helpful sort of discipline in some ways, trying to think about how does the Christian story, in all of its variety and through all the acts of Scripture, creation and fall, and kind of Israel and future hope, and God's redemptive act in the person of Christ, and new heaven, new earth, all of that stuff. How does that relate to all these things?
Mm,
And I think what has been kind of interesting, surprising, hopeful has been, the way that that framing is so helpful as a way into, basically everything, any subject. So that's been interesting. I enjoyed that Michael Weir one. That was a
mm.
good one. In that, again, I think, particularly when we look at the situation in the US at the moment, and maybe it's just me, Grace, but I feel a little bit pessimistic about kind of the state of politics in the United States just now. I think, again, hearing what he had to say was in some ways, there was encouragement there as well as sort of challenge. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that would be how I felt about that.
So
And
have you changed your mind on the well, maybe from one of those episodes, or maybe another one? Is there anything that yeah, has challenged you so much that you think differently about now?
well, probably it's probably no exaggeration to say that in every episode, I probably think slightly differently
Yeah.
about something. And I think that's what's so helpful, isn't it, about sort of the art of conversation, isn't it? And maybe that's something we need to learn in our kind of wider culture and social media space, that we kind of to listen and to be open to kind of correction of sort of ideas and thoughts. I mean, it's slightly, I know it sounds slightly flippant, but again, the one on fashion, I think, I mean, it's, I think my prejudice towards that is, gosh, it's so kind of, shallow,
Mm,
superficial, all the rest of it. But in fact, having had the conversation, I thought, oh, there's something actually deep and meaningful under this. And just that kind of reflection again on, the significance of, in the biblical story, God's perhaps first redemption act is clothing Adam and Eve, and that I just kind of, that's sparked my curiosity a bit,
but you
and
haven't
I think,
totally
that's
changed your
interesting.
style since, or anything like that? Or taken
Well,
Christina up
well,
on one
that
of her personal styles?
Well,
appointments.
you say all that, Grace, but I mean, let's just wait till the second series.
Oh,
That's
okay,
what I
wow.
think.
If that's not a reason for listeners to come back, I don't know what will be.
Well, I think let's try and find some more, Grace, before the end of this program. Yeah.
Um,
Grace, I should be asking you something. I've sort of you've kind of I'm distracted in the
no,
conversation,
no.
but I suppose I was thinking of you. Is there any topic that we haven't covered? I mean, obviously there's loads of topics we haven't covered, but that you're particularly excited about that we really should explore in the future. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been so good about what we've done already is that, I was going to say they're all topics that are kind of are current and maybe that we in some way have some sort of contact with, either whether it's that we've heard about something like AI, but we haven't decided to necessarily research much more of it. But I think obviously we're wanting to cover topics that feel kind of pertinent and sort of like maybe a bit prickly even today. Of you sort of see the title and you think, oh, actually, how do I respond to that as a Christian? And I think, yeah, without wanting to give away any spoilers about what may or may not be coming next or in the future, seeing as you asked, Paul, I think one that I
Mm.
think would be really good to cover is around mental health. I think it's something that, whether it touches our own lives or touches the lives of people around us, or I think it'd be fair to say that sometimes whether it's the church or Christians have got it very wrong in terms of what to say when it comes to mental health and what not to say. And so I think actually having, because it does feel like a very key issue at the moment and probably will only become more so. I think, I would be really interested to hear from somebody who maybe has some experience in that area or has done some more thinking in a way that's probably potentially deeper than mine or slightly more extensive than mine. So I think that would be one that I think we should add to the list for potential discussion. How about you? Have you got any that are on your mind?
Oh, well, all sorts of things I'd be interested. I mean, I'd be quite interested to talk about at some stage the culture wars. Not, I mean, of course, people know that in a way we've tried to pitch this podcast as a sort of alternative to that, to say there's a better story to tell and a better way of framing these things. That avoid some of that, but as a sort of phenomenon, it'd be quite interesting to look at that
Mm,
and kind of connections with the Christian story. I think there are some big issues, whether it's to do with race, would be interesting, and other
yeah.
issues kind of related to subject areas related to kind of what it is. I mean, all of this is about what it is to be human, but around kind of human identity and all that sort of stuff. I'd like at some stage, it'd be really good to do something on food, and
Maybe
so
with
that's
snacks. Is that
well, that
appropriate
would be
when
good.
when
Well,
recording a
then
podcast?
here, so Grace, you let slip to me yesterday that although it's not
Oh
your
no.
kind of first base, Luke, your husband, um, he's a bit of a baker, so
He
maybe
is.
he could provide the goodies,
Yeah.
for that show. That would be
Yeah. So
fun, wouldn't
you
it?
listeners can all enjoy us scoffing away into our microphones.
Yes, well, I will put my requests in, obviously. I mean,
Please
my
do.
personal favorite would be around probably coffee and walnut cake, something like that. I think,
Okay.
when that's done well, I don't know if that's on his sort of
Well,
signature
rather
list.
unfortunately for you, Paul, I'm actually allergic to nuts, so that probably wouldn't be the
Oh,
one.
really? Okay. Well, we could have it without the walnuts.
We could have
Here's
coffee.
here's another thing. Great. So when we did the podcast live with Tom Holland,
Yeah.
people might not know that we did that just after he had recorded an episode of that other podcast. What's it called? The Rest is History. It's got,
I think
you know,
that's it.
it's got a few listeners, hasn't it? And he had done it on the history of chocolate, and he had just let slip in that his favourite chocolate bar was Fruit and Nut, which I have to say it's a bit lowbrow for Tom Holland, but there it
Could
is.
be
I
a better
mean, the
choice.
authentic self speaking. So Fruit and Nut, and then he said, and then so here's the thing. I obviously played right into that. So that evening, then gave him a bar of Fruit and Nut, just as a warm up, and he said that he'd been inundated with people sending him fruit and nut chocolate.
Wow.
So I thought, now the thing is, Grace, I am not as confident that if we talk about our favorite chocolate bars, that will have quite the same impact. But
Shocking,
I thought
really,
it was
though,
worth a
isn't it? I
try.
mean,
So just tell me, what's your favourite chocolate bar?
ooh, I love. Have you ever had Tony's chocolate?
Yes, yes, indeed.
I'm
In
a big
fact, I
Tony's
have
fan.
a bar somewhere. Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
very good.
yeah.
Excellent.
How
Well, we
about you,
can.
Paul? Go on. Sorry, I know you want me to ask you too.
Oh, I didn't know I was that transparent, Grace. I would say, have you ever had Fry's cream
Yes, I
chocolate?
have.
So now I would say that is the closest to kind of Willy Wonka chocolate factory chocolate. So if
Okay,
you imagine the sort of bar that Charlie Bucket would have
you think it would be that?
opened and eaten, I think it would have been that. I think that's
Yeah, you
amazing. And
can't
it's
get them
still
everywhere though,
pretty
I
amazing.
feel like.
It's
My
very
mum is
hard.
a
It's
a
very
fan of that as
difficult.
well, and I feel like they're few and
Yeah.
far between. Speaking of requests though, I did just think that actually if people have got, chocolate aside, ideas or things that they would like us to look at in the podcast, then we would love to hear. So perhaps people could, comment, or if you wanted to leave us a little message on whatever platform you're listening to, because it's always interesting to hear what we want to give the listeners what they want, don't we, Paul?
We do let them eat cake, etc., or chocolate, obviously, in this situation. And there is also, of course, there is I mean, people could actually write to us. That would be weird, wouldn't it? A letter in
Yeah,
the post, but email too. And the best way to do that is hello@licc.org.uk. Send in the subject you'd like us to discuss, and we'll do our very best to cover it. But Grace, I think we're almost there. We're
yeah,
almost
we've
at an end.
sidetracked to
That's a
chocolate, so I
wrap
think
on
that's
the
a good time to wrap up.
a wrap on the first series. Thank you so much.
Indeed, but as we alluded to, you have no reason to fear, because between now and the next series, which there is going to be a second series, we also have an election special mini series for you, and more details about that will come in due course. But yeah, from Paul and I, thank you so much for listening. And if you did enjoy this first series of The Whole Life, follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to, leave a review, and maybe share it with others, so they can get involved too. But until next time, from Paul and me, Grace Fielding, that was The Whole Life. Goodbye, everyone, and see you again very soon.
See you soon, everyone.